Okay, so hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Erik Uszkiewicz. I'm one of the vice-chairpersons of the Hungarian Europe Society. And just a couple of words before we start our webinar. On behalf of the Hungarian Europe Society, we welcome everyone. Now we have the chance to host our eighth and in this series, the last webinar. So after a year, we reached the last event today in this series, but I would like to remind everyone that in September, as a closing of this project, we will have a closing conference. Very soon you will get the detailed program and all the technical information related to our online closing conference. So due to the several uncertainties, we've decided that in September we won't host an offline event in Budapest. However, we wanted to do so, but finally we've decided that it will be an online event, just the full series of this webinar. Before we start our event today, I would like to remind all of you to the open space surface, which is an integrated part of this project where you can find all the related corresponding papers, our speakers and excellent experts were writing us different papers, not just for this session, but for the previous 7 ones. You can find all the papers there, and we are still waiting for your comments, and we are very much looking forward to getting your views. And just like this event, all of the previous ones were recorded. So you can find all the recordings on YouTube and on the social media platforms of the Hungarian Europe Society and on our webpage as well. We are very glad that you've continued this webinar series, and we very much looking forward to welcome you during the closing conference in September as well. And just like during the previous sessions, I would like to mention our sponsor, the US Embassy in Budapest, because with this generous support, we could organize this series of events. So the uncertain times maybe will continue, but the uncertain times as a project will end soon. But now we have the chance to listen 3 distinguished speakers and our moderator, who is Emma Gothár, who is the coordinator of this project and who is the coordinator of the Hungarian Europe Society. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being with us. And Emma, then the floor and the task is yours.
So also from me, dear all, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all here today in the last debate of our discussion series, and the title is Energy and Climate Policy, Green Future Amidst Competing Interests. And although the importance of the environmental issue has been long clear, it has gained more attention merely in the last couple of years, and by now, well, let's see, it has reached a tipping point and became an essential part of the scientific, political, and economic agendas. And therefore, when we were organizing this webinar series, when we were planning it, it was no question that we will dedicate at least one debate to the environmental topic. Actually, if it was only me, we would have dedicated probably all 8 debates to the environmental related questions. But luckily we have István and Erik in the project team, and they are great advocates of debating other important issues in the Central European region. And I think I am allowed to say that they are advocates of debate in general, let it be policy relevant or not. But joking aside, even if I succeeded to push more time for the environmental related discussion in the webinar series, it would have been real difficult to find enough expertise and speakers from the Visegrad region, which is, in my opinion, one of the burning issues, because when we are talking about climate policy and energy policy, we need policy experts with at least some understanding in environmental sciences, and that is very rare. And also we talk about sustainability as it was obvious, but actually it's far from that. It is a normative term, and as you all know, it has three pillars, the so-called three pillars of sustainability, the environmental, social, and economic ones. And the big question is how to find the balance among these pillars, and what are the trade-offs when we are, for example, implementing the economic aspect of the European Green Deal. So what does it mean for social and environmental sustainability? And I think the answer depends also on the system boundaries we draw. So whether we are talking about Hungary or Poland, the Visegrad states or the EU. And that is, well, the main question for today. So let me introduce you our speakers. I think I can say a new generation of sustainability experts. So we have Rafal Fabianowicz, who is a research fellow at the international think tank called European Democracy Lab. And he's a Ph.D. student at the András University, Budapest. And in his Ph.D. project, he's focusing on climate-related sustainability and democracy. And he works together with our second speaker, Lilla Bartuszek. She is the Secretary General of the Visegrad for Sustainability Initiative, which is YAFLA non-profit initiative aiming for cooperation in the implementation of the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. And last but not least, we have Csaba Lovász, our third speaker, and he's a PhD candidate of the Corvinus University Budapest at the Doctoral School of International Relations and Political Sciences. And while the homepage of the doctoral school is not really user-friendly, but I hope that I'm not mistaken when I'm saying that Csaba, in your PhD project focuses on the Central European countries' stock markets from a geographic perspective.
Yes.
Yes. So I would suggest that Rafa, you begin, Lilla continues, and Csaba closes the first part of the debate. And you will have 8 to 10 minutes time to present your papers and your thoughts about the topic. And then we would open the floor for questions and discussions. And for the audience, so please raise your hands. Questions are really welcomed. And you can also type your questions in the chat. So Rafa, the floor is yours. I hope you have the right to share the screen if you need that.
I will just present it in a verbal way. I think it's a short presentation. The PPTs are a bit better sometimes for longer presentations. So my topic today touches on the implementation of the European Green Deal in Central and Eastern Europe. And I called it Lessons from the Past. I would similarly, like Emma, start with the aims of the European Green Deal. Also 3 pillars, as it was mentioned, an economic, ecological pillar and a social pillar. I think in my research, the social pillar is quite important. And by quoting the European Commission, it's leaving no person and no place behind. That's kind of like a very honorable aim. And I think the European Union is doing quite a lot in this field. I will touch on that a bit later. But if we speak about leaving no person or no place behind, we need to see which region is the most vulnerable in the European Union. And that would be most probably the Central and Eastern European countries. They heavily rely on fossil fuels, nuclear energy, rather a smaller part of renewable energy. For those countries, it will be naturally more difficult to catch up with probably more developed countries like in Western Europe. And that brings experts to the conclusion that we have a rising gap, or again rising gap, between the East and the West, like a social and economic gap. And some would also argue it's similar to past transitions, like in the 90s, where we also had a social and economical gap. And to bring an example, if we had this transition in Poland to come from a rather authoritarian state to a modern democracy, which joined the EU in 2004, in a 14 years time span, they achieved quite a lot. But in that time, Polish government used so-called shock therapy, a growth strategy, if you want it. European Green Deal is also a growth strategy, meant deprivatization, no privatization of state-owned goods. And that led, for example, to a lot of unemployment. So in our understanding of a just transition, this is also a terminus and technicals for this leaving no one behind. That meant these people were basically left behind. And I think this problem in the past was attacked, or they tried to find a solution with foreign direct investments. To be very short, these are economic investments to strengthen the economy in a specific set of countries. And that helped to make the gap closer between the West and the East. And this was a way to tackle this social pillar. However, I see now with the European Green Deal as a new growth strategy that history might repeat itself. So we might face with a new transition, maybe not from authoritarian states to democracy, but maybe this transition from decoupling from emissions is also a transition, maybe not 14 years. Now we have more time, 30 years until 2050. But there are probably similar challenges. And I believe the European Union learned from this past. And this is the reason why they introduced a so-called just transition mechanism. It mobilizes around 60 to 100 billion euros in investments to these most vulnerable countries. So far so good, but there is a but. So I see a challenge. If the European Union says it's a growth strategy, this implies somehow that we have here an economic focus, and that it might lead to like backslides, or that we cannot fix challenges along the political and the social pillar. There is, from my point of view, kind of like a false or biased, let's not call it false, but a biased concept of modernization. So for a long time, economists like Jeffrey Sachs, or also political scientists like Levitsky in a way, they argued that in a developed country with a good economy, democracy and this kind of social and political pillar will also develop. So bring the money in, and the countries will figure it out. This is actually, it was quite accurate in many cases, but if we look into newest developments, let's say Hungary, Philippines, Turkey, Venezuela, these are kind of countries which developed the democracy and developed also the economic market, a stronger economy, but they still figured out to backslide in democratic development. in European Union history, Polish and Hungarian cases are quite famous for that. Political scientists would call it deconsolidation of democracy, deficits in democracy, defective democracy. So a lot of adjectives for this kind of like problematic, let's say, development. I would give examples. Hungary was titled Transitional or Hybrid Regime by Freedom House, the only partly free country within the EU. And I would just ask the question, how is it possible for an economically so well developed state in the EU to have this kind of like backlash? So it needs to come the question or the logical argumentation, economics that can't be the solution for our future transition. So we can't argue that the European Green Deal will, just because we have a growth strategy, we will solve all solutions. From my point of view, this is not how it works. So what happened, for example, in Poland back in time? You had this unemployed people and populist, like let's say, parties used that narrative to say, yeah, we were invaded by the bad West or by capitalists, and they destroyed basically our country, which is maybe partly some truth into it, but it's like a biased narrative, and it divides the country into two major parties. And the problem is also with the deconsolidated democracies, which struggle a bit with the democracy. They often tend to have this kind of enemy conceptions. So in this past case, it was like, yeah, the bad West or the capitalists, which led to unemployment in Poland. Now you have like different groups. In 2015, it were migrant groups. Now we're talking often about homosexuals. We're talking bad about EU. So in Hungary, the Stop Brussels campaign, if you can remind the billboards, that, yeah, or George Soros with his, yeah, let's say, power to invade Europe with migrants. So a lot of enemy concepts, and this is used often by these countries which are like deconsolidated. I have the worry, or my research wants to point out that these kind of enemy conceptions could be used also in the framework of a European Green Deal. An authoritarian state, or tends to be authoritarian, they try to manifest their power through, for example, controversial legislation. Enemy conceptions are quite useful for that, to give a legitimization for a controversial law. So environmentalists could be really the next target group, which could be easily imaginable. And we need to recognize that if we do not take care of the European Green Deal also as a social and political project, we might face difficulties. I give an example why I wouldn't trust, for example, Polish or a Hungarian government to be very cooperative on, let's say, on environmental or climate issues. The countries were not willing to sign the 2050 deals until the EU Council said that only the countries with full implementation of the 2050 aims, or with yes to agreeing to them, they will get 100% of the funding of the just transition mechanism, which I was mentioning. So we have here a kind of like a huge monetary mechanism which was played out by the European Union, that we have these countries now agreeing to the climate crisis. But these countries, like the Visegrad countries, for example, they have a strong history in saying no, or in obstructing environmental and climate legacies. It started like in 2008 with Copenhagen COP, that they tried to sabotage, or let's say set out clear conditions, monetary conditions, how they would like to proceed with the legislation just under specific monetary conditions. You don't see the will here, like the real authentic, let's say, narrative or clear aim to help our climate. So at some point, if the money from the Just Transition Fund might be already paid out, the European Union needs to make sure that this money is connected to some conditions. So you need to implement the rule, you need to take care of the rule of law, that this money won't be abused in any way in the future. And I believe this cleavage could open up easily in the next 5 or 10 years. And I could easily imagine that environmentalist or climate movements could be not useful for the regimes, and that they could turn around the current narrative, which is kind of positive. For example, to make a fair point, Hungary is the first country in the European Union now to implement into national legislation. So this is kind of like a step forward, but we need to see how strong is this commitment in real. If we look at climate experts, they would say to the Hungarian law that basically until 2030, it's not that quite effective. So basically Hungary will not do a lot in the next 10 years, even if they have a 2050 aim, but then you just have 20 years time left from a 30-year span. And if then other challenges will come, the whole European Green Deal project, from my point of view, can struggle. So we need to make sure that these are not just like lip confessions to receive some just transition mechanism money, that these countries are fully committed to what they're saying and going hand by hand with the rule of law and cooperation within the European Union. So my solutions are two solutions, and now at the end of my presentation, we need to support, and here are the lessons from the past, foreign direct investments to stabilize these countries. An example is the Just Transition Mechanism. Talking about transatlantic relations, the major framework of this project, I'm also convinced that the US under Joseph Biden, a liberal democratic government, they will have a big interest into investing into the region to make sure that the social gap will be smaller. Also, maybe geopolitical advantages, because the region is already invested from the former Trump administration. The 3C initiatives is an energy independence project, which was done, which has like a very good value into it. And I see also capacity for renewable energy to make the region more prosperous in terms of sustainable development. And here is where the democracies globally need to work together to support each other's project. And the other thing is democracies need to be protected. So the US, for example, took action in sanctioning Bulgaria recently, where the European Union did not much. And there was not a lot of response to that, but there were some serious corruption within the government. And I think this is how we need to cooperate, that democracies globally need to protect each other. And I think the European Union has some deficit in it. And now we have this discussion about the rule of law mechanism, which was ignited last year, and formally the mechanism exists, but the European Union needs to figure out a way to make this really work. And I think these global democracies need to cooperate with each other and also invest in each other. And this is how maybe we can learn from the past, that we just don't look just into the economic development, but also into the political and social pillar. And I'm also already overdue a bit with 4 minutes, but I hope Emma can forgive me and pass the torch to the next panelist.
Of course. Thank you for your presentation. And Lilla, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Emma, and thanks, Rafal, for your presentation. I agree with almost everything you mentioned. However, I would like to put the whole thing in maybe a bit of a different context, because in the beginning, Emma also mentioned the role of the V4 in this whole process. And as the Secretary General of V4 SDG, I would rather reflect on how the V4 can have a role in this whole process, and how the V4's role plays out in terms of the EU and sustainable development as a whole. Because of course, just to start with the basics, obviously, Emma, you mentioned also the 3 dimensions. It goes without saying that what we need is a holistic approach. So we cannot just get the environmental part or just the economic part out of this whole thing. And as Rafal said, you know, it all integrates and it has interlinkages. And when it comes to the V4, we do believe that it has a really special place in this whole process. I also do my PhD in this concept, and also in my research, my topic exactly, it relates to actually a lot in what Csaba mentioned in his remarks. So I will be really happy to listen to his remarks later on as well. Is that how something that was originally adopted on an international level, like the UN level, being a non-binding, legally non-binding framework, such as the UN SDGs, how can it then all the way go down if we envisage a pyramid, an inverse pyramid, how it goes down to the national level, and even within the national level, how it goes to the local government. And obviously there are multiple layers attached to it. And obviously you start at the UN level, but then you go just one step down, and there is the intergovernmental level, there is the European Union. Obviously with more binding rules and regulations. And I think it's really interesting to see how the EU plays a role as an international actor on the one hand, and then in that context, in the context of the EU and the UN, the EU is kind of acts as a state, obviously with a bit of a different portfolio, but in a sense it acts as a state, where on the other hand, the EU as the group of states consists of 27 EU member states. It also has to make sure that, you know, the member states itself, they have or they do what it takes to implement these goals. And obviously something that we cannot really go over is the question of competences. And this is something that I think that we don't really speak that much about, even though it I think it's a really important question when it comes to sustainability and when it comes to environmental policies in general, because obviously we have one matrix, which on the one hand has the SDGs with the 3 dimensions we mentioned earlier. And on the other hand, we have the EU law and the EU legal system on the other hand, which obviously has different categories, such as the shared competences, national competences, and EU competences. And I think at one point there is, you know, this kind of a backlash in, okay, there are the UN goals, but what is it that we actually can achieve on a national level? And what is it that the EU has to make sure that the EU achieves? Because it's an EU competence. And one of them is, for example, just to mention the social pillar a short bit, is education. Because, you know, we tend to say, okay, yes, now the SDGs are there and there is quality education. Sure, but what everyone tends to forget is that education is a national competence. And even though EU can incentivize whatever it wants, and it is really good if the EU creates incentivization for national policies, but at the end of the day, the national governments have to do their job and their part in it. And just going back to the climate action and the climate section of the whole sustainable development framework, this is something where I think it's really safe to say that the EU has more role to play, or more room to play rather, because then obviously less national competence boundaries are there. And this is why I think it's really important to see this whole V4 EU sustainability triangle in a specific way, because on the one hand, we do believe that the V4 should step up in the EU perspective, meaning that obviously all 4 V4 states are EU member states. And this being said, we believe that collective action can help a lot in actually turning the region more sustainable and stepping up and discussing those issues on EU level that is relevant for all the V4 states. But on the other hand, if we step a bit outside of the V4 bubble, we also have a really crucial role to play in the whole sustainability transition of the CEE region. And with that, we really hope that V4 plus formulas can be enhanced, and being EU member states on the one hand, but also being a strong regional cooperation with really similar, on one perspective, really similar issues to tackle, can really help to make the V4 the central station of the whole sustainability transition. And here also we can turn a bit to the EU enlargement, and we can say that, okay, on the one hand, we are the part of the EU, but on the other hand, we also are a regional cooperation that can be responsible for helping other actors, such as the Western Balkans, to step up and to really make sure they have this path of sustainability transition. And this is why I just really quickly, if this share screening works. No, it's not able at the moment. So I can't share this.
Erik, are you there? Because Erik could.
Yeah. I will make the host, Lilla, and then a few minutes later.
You just have to allow other participants to share the screen.
Yeah, it's secure, but actually it's we can manage it elsewhere as well, because I can just drop in the chat our proposal package that we just adopted. So it's in the chat, but in the meantime, I see that I can share the screen. So I'll just really quickly also do that in a second. If I can, yes, now I can. So here are the 15 action points that V4 SDG just introduced last week. And obviously, I would be really happy to go through all of them, but we are lack of time here. So I would just welcome you to look at action points 13, 14, and 15. These are the 3 action points, which goes to the chapter we entitled V4 as a global actor for sustainability. And in that, there is this kind of layered approach I just mentioned. On the one hand, we believe that really strengthening the V4 collaboration at the EU level can help a lot in actually creating a pipeline for V4 interests in the EU. But on the other hand, also action point 14 refers to this being a central role of the CE sustainability transition. And also a bit more forward-looking or a bit more outside the box thinking is action 15, where we propose that for developing countries, the V4 can also act as a global actor in terms of creating or providing a joint development assistance team. So with that, and you can find the whole document now in the chat, so feel free to take a look, and also feel free to just drop us an email or connect with us if you have any suggestions or concerns or remarks with the document, because this sustainability vision will serve as the basis for our 1-year-long campaign, in which we really want to make sure that sustainability is being put in the central stage of the V4's agenda, especially now with the Hungarian V4 presidency that started last week. And yeah, EU plays a really crucial role in that, because we can't, at the end of the day, we just can't not acknowledge that we are EU member states. And this is what Rafal mentioned, obviously really urgent and really crucial questions of democracy related questions when it comes to the EU. And I think that the real question when it comes to sustainability lies in the fact that we have to kind of not overlook it, because obviously these are all really important questions. Everything relates to democratic deficits and democratic, concerns in this respect. But sustainability has always had to be looked over like a holistic perspective. We believe it has to go way beyond party politics, and it has to go way beyond how V4 is being perceptualized in any of the countries. And we really hope that with sustainability, we can propose an alternative to the regional governments with which we can really make them pledge themselves for sustainability cooperation, because at the end of the day, really, this is where the future lies for the V4 and the EU as well. And it would be a really nice bridge to have between the V4 as a global actor and the EU as an even bigger global actor. So with that, I'd just like to thank you for the floor. And should you have any questions, I'm really happy to answer it.
Thank you, Lilla, also for the perfect timekeeping. Csaba, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for these two amazing presentations. And all of these two presentations reveal a really interesting and important aspect of these questions, I mean, climate change. And these two different, a little bit different approach shows that how complex issue is climate change really. I brought some points from the perspective of climate policy and how climate policy affects on the every level, from the supranational level like UN and the EU, and the national level and governmental level, and down to the smallest units like local governments, communities, and individuals as well. The first part, we can see that climate changing, and it's a really huge issue, and it's really a crisis. We can see that in the last decades we have the warmest summers, and we have a lot of extreme weather events like hot summer heat waves, which affect all elderly people and aging society. And at the same time, we can see like extreme cold weather, like in Texas, which is effects on electricity prices, which went up like 10,000% due to the lack of immunity and resilience. So we are living clearly in uncertain times, which this presentation, which series says. EU and UN has a crucial role in this case, because EU and UN are supranational organizations who united a lot of nations, and it's a platform for nations with different interests, economically, environmentally, and so on, politically as well. This awareness related to climate change is starting in the 70s. In one point with the IPCC reports and UN reports as well, and from the civil side like the Roman Club and others, and scientific evidence also shows that it's a huge trouble. And since the Industrial Revolution, the average climate and the average temperature rose up like 1.5 Celsius degrees, which is effects on the planet different ways. And the Carpathian Basin in Central Europe, one of the most vulnerable places of the planet, because of the different physical, geographical, and climate aspects. For example, the fight between moderate Mediterranean and continental temperature. Now it's a continental one. That's why it's super dry and hot. We can feel on our skin. So in a nutshell, we are in a crisis, and the awareness is rising because a lot of agreements has been signed and ratified between nations, like the Rio Agreement or the the Kyoto Protocol, and the most important and most actual one, the Paris Agreement. And for example, many of the European countries ratified it in relatively early at the beginning, for example, including Hungary. But we can see that in this agreement is not enough alone. The EU, as a successful political entity, it's also a crucial part of it, because it has a large market. Who want to enter on this market should accept the rules, like large companies should fit with the standards of the emission criteria, like huge car makers and so on. And on the other hand, the EU has developed democratic institutes and foundation of negotiations and expertise. And EU also achieved some milestone in this process. For example, the first one is the emission trading mechanism, which is accepted in 2005. It was less efficient in the first years, but now we can see the carbon price went up, and it's squeezed those companies who fuel by fossil or use old-fashioned technologies. At the same time, they also accepted climate actions and climate plans and climate loans. The last laws. And the last one, it's accepted on the basis of the European New Green Deal, which is the most ambitious enterprise in the human history, in that because they want to transform the economy in a zero economy by 2050. But it causes a lot of difficulties and a lot of uncertainties. Yeah, and we can see how the Hungarian climate policy fits in the EU's climate policy, because the Hungarian Parliament accepted the second national climate change strategy in 2018, and it's technically a good document because it's written by experts, and it has 3 pillars like adaptation, mitigation, and partnership and civil society, which includes action plans which has measurements and acts which can realize and measure by indicators and monitoring, which also an interesting part. And we can see interesting processes as well. For example, the Hungarian government secretly sent out a questionnaire in 2019. And I also shared this questionnaire, and I feel that I became something great, because more than 2,000 people filled this questionnaire without any promotion or any large advertisement, billboards, and so on. And the government reflected these questionnaires and the public opinion, and might be it's a positive sign. And they accepted the Climate and Environmental Protection Act Action Plan in 2020, which is a mixture of environment protection packages and climate change measures, but it's still a large step or leap in my perspective. For example, this energy transition, the largest fossil fuel power plant, the Máté power plant, can be shut down in 2025, maybe a little bit because of the pressure of the carbon pricing. And at the same time, it's also helped by just transitional mechanisms and like IP projects, which are really complex and really wonderful projects, because I'm take part in them actually, and I see the process how complicated to discussion with different partners and different interests and bring together in the common way. And the other ones, the transportation, it's also interesting to see the subsidies on electric mobilization or e-bikes or the bus industry, which is a Hungarian specialty, but it's also significant in Poland. I mean, these actions might be suitable and can reach, and they can help to reach net zero emission goals. And also forestification related to family policy, because LULUCF is also an important part of the maybe one of the most important in the fight against climate change, because it's the only forestry in the only thing which can absorb carbon dioxide properly. But if we don't ever, we can do it wrong, and these forests also can be net emitters related to the climate change. So a lot of complicated issues and unsolved tasks and uncertainties, but we can see, and I'm a little bit more positive in that kind of aspect. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Csaba, and especially thank you for happy to hear some positive news about Hungary related to the climate policy implementation. And I would just kick off the discussion with well, let's say difficult question, and then we would open the floor for other questions. So my question would be, so the democratic blacksiding seems to be a huge barrier in implementing the European Green Deal or the Sustainable Development Goals, or any kind of well, real cooperation for sustainability development and sustainability transformation, transition. As Lilla said, the implementation of a holistic perspective. And how do you see the chances of overcoming this barrier also from a civil society perspective? So especially in such a hostile environment like Hungary. I don't know who would like to begin.
Maybe I start and then I pass the torch to Lilla, because you mentioned the backsliding first and then the holistic approach. So I believe if we want to solve the current transition, we as a society, we need to be on the same page. But if we are polarizing and splitting people in two different camps, that won't happen. So we need really to, and here where civil society comes in, we need civil society initiatives like V4SDG, more young initiatives. You see also these global climate strikes. These are good positive signs that something is happening. But where I worry, for example, in Hungary, I believe there's a lack of media freedom. So if I want to read up something about climate change or having some discourse, I won't find it actually on public television. So what I see on public television between the football shows is that the newest law against homo pedophiles, I don't know however you want to call it, but not on agenda what I am interested in. So if I want to read it up, I need to read in HVG, one of the last media outlets which actually reporting on that. And this is the problem. If you don't have a discourse within the country, you can't actually debate stronger measurements, because no one is debating publicly. So if you look at the climate law in Hungary, very specifically, the 2050 aims, which are very cool and good that the Hungarian government did this. This is a good job. But this law was actually taken from the Green Party in Hungary, which they designed it in a way stricter way. So actually they stripped it away, sold it to the EU as a Hungarian success. But in the population, no one is discussing it. So there's no real pressure on the government, because they believe they can do quite everything what they like to do. And in Hungary and Germany, it would be a bit different. In Germany, if you have, like, you can see the latest Green leader who wants to be the chancellor, Ms. Baerbock, if she does something wrong, there's a lot of things in the media, and there is some real pressure to it. And so she needs to come up with solutions to solve that somehow. So I think how we want to overcome this deficit, we need to strengthen civil society, bottom-up initiatives more, that people have these echoes or the possibility to speak with each other, that it reach different levels. And I think this can be overcome with help from external actors. So this is what the governments don't like, actually. They say that this is our domestic issue, but if you have an unfair system, you can't solve it from within. An unfair system can be solved with help from outside. And I think the European Union plays a huge role in that, and with their different mechanisms. And then I come to the closure. So what the EU is currently doing, what I'm researching in my current paper for my dissertation, is that there is positive conditionality and there's negative conditionality. So basically what the EU can, for example, do, they can reward good behavior, what they do, or you can sanction bad behavior if you see there is lack of media freedom, there's abuse of money, and the EU needs to be very consequential with that. And that was the reason why I mentioned actually the US, because the US are not a member state of the EU, and they quickly did something against a member state which showed corruption, what the EU obviously cannot do since now 16 or 17 years, and it's just like running in a circle. So we need to break out of this circle somehow, and make sure that we can, we as people came on the same page again.
Yes, and if I may just chip in, yes, Rafal mentioned that we have to be as a society on the same page. So I would say we as a society have to, we don't have to be on the same page. We just have to learn how to express that we are not on the same page, and how to express the different opinions we have, so that we can, on the one hand, learn from each other, even though it might sound a bit, theoretic. And also we have different sectors. We have the business sector, we have the academic sector, we have the NGO sector, the civil sector, youth in general, and then obviously we have the governmental sector. So this is why something that is clear is that we have to involve all of them in this whole decision-making process, regardless whether it's about sustainability, whether it's about anything else, basically. We have to make sure that all of these sectors, they have their own role in this whole thing. And just as an example, because they can bring different perspectives. For example, now that when we designed this proposal package that I just dropped in the chat, we spent 2-3 months in the dark, so to say, without coming forward with this proposal package, because we were conducting closed expert consultations on various topics with experts from the academic sector, experts from the civil sector, experts from really youth in general, also, so basically all of them. And the idea was that obviously we have our understandings, we have our ideas, but we really want to hear what each and every sector and their representatives think about the different proposals we laid forward. Because it happens that we believed, based on our experience, based on our research, that something might work in the region. And now it's not even in our proposal package, because during the discussions, it turned out that, in everyday life, when it comes to the business sector, this doesn't work like that. And our lovely experts were really kind enough to say that, yes, it's a nice initiative, but at the current framework, it just won't fit in. So if it won't fit in, it doesn't worth, running after it or chasing it. And this is, I think, something that it's really something we have to maybe think about. That Rafal mentioned the climate strikes, which I always believe that those kind of movements are really, really necessary in order to raise awareness, in order to kind of be the pressure behind the whole wheel of this whole process of sustainability transition. But at the end of the day, it is these are the governments, these are decision makers that will turn this whole thing into actual action and legal action and documents, binding documents, or on international level, maybe legally non-binding, but still politically pressure creating documents. So what we have to achieve is that we have to propose an alternative where they can actually say, okay, it can be a go, because we can be on the same page, as Rafal said. And for that, what's really needed is the debate, and is including every single sector and their representative. And obviously, there's just, civil sector is one, and maybe the most important of all these sectors. And obviously, generally, an environment where civil sector actors are not that well heard can hinder this process a long way. So what we have to achieve is for civil sector actors to be heard, to make sure that their expertise and their actions of actually connecting the other actors, such as the business sector or the academia, they're actually heard. And also, obviously, business is necessary because they see the everyday processes, the everyday economic processes behind the whole thing. And on the other hand, academia is really needed because they see the science behind it. And without science, we cannot move forward. So yeah, just to conclude, inclusivity, this is what we need. And we have to listen to all the sectors and the experts having the expertise relating to the different questions.
Thank you very much. And these are really valuable points. And I also agree with Rafal and Lilla that it's really important role of the civil society and other stakeholders as well, because different kind of opinions and effect on each other, and it's get reach us, because climate change is a common issue, so it's won't have any color or anything else, because it's endanger the whole humanity and planet as well. So we should debate with each other and listen each other's opinion and arguments, because how it works. And that's why polarization is so harmful in this process, because it's block the debate between the different opinions and stakeholders. And I think in that point we should separate politics and policies, because politics about manipulation people and get more votes, and it's not about the people, it's about the politician themselves and the power itself as well. But the policies, it's really for the people. And I would like to protect the government agents in this actions, because so it's a popular phrase that deep state, it's more separated from the government, because these are background institutes with expertise, and for example, scientists from real science, and for example, real science and politics nothing to do with each other. They just make models and so on. So in a nutshell, a government also has an important role as an actor and investor at the same time, but civil activity also a relevant part of this process. And I took part several just transitional plan meetings, which is a really heated place, and a lot of stakeholders expressed their interest. And for example, it was really interesting to see that how minors behave, because I mean, who represents them? Because in the northern Hungarian region, because they said that they are heard that how society talk about them, and it is, for example, highlighted an important issue that we should sensible for the debate partners and the stakeholders, and these inclusions are really good opportunities to know their feelings and their impressions. And and the final was that it's lead us to the solution, in my view.
Thank you. I think that Michael had a question. Michael Czerny, are you there?
Yes, I am here. I'm trying to unmute myself. Yeah, I succeeded. Thank you.
Yes, you succeeded.
Yeah, I just reacted to what Rafal said about the primacy of the policy in these considerations. That it is very important to see that somehow. Well, my experience here from Prague. No, we are now less than 3 months ahead of parliamentary elections, and sustainability and climate action, climate change are not the main priorities of the campaign, of the electoral campaign. Everybody is talking only about taxes, yeah, and in spite of that they were a disastrous tornado in southern Moravia, which killed 6 people, which destroyed hundreds of houses. There is no awareness. There is, I mean, on the bottom line of the political mind, of political thinking, of the electoral campaign, the climate change unfortunately doesn't play a role, which I don't know what's the reason, because yes, this is one thing, is the real situation about the climate change, and the other thing is what we are now facing, this huge amount of money coming, or which is supposed to come from the European Union, from Brussels, but it doesn't match automatically one to another. It may be used if the civil society is not strong enough, if the political life is not genuine, is not doesn't work, if the institutions do not work properly. The governments, of course, tend to see this money as another money, for we can use it for anything we want. We only have to make a green label to these projects, and then we can use it as we want, because we have support, we have public support. Yes, this is my concern. Just if someone could comment it, maybe I'm too old and I see it in a very gloomy perspective. Maybe it's not proper, but yes, thank you.
Yeah, maybe I could do on a 1 minute comment, that we have many questions left. From my perspective, also in Czech Republic, the democracy is backsliding. I think within the EU there is this OLAF agency which is investigating fraud, basically. So there's a lot of money and oligarchs working with Czech government. So someone would say there's state capture. So I believe, just like if we are living in a good democracy, let's call it good governance, you have a government which is putting tables on the agenda, no matter how popular they are. Just like if it needs to be debated, it needs to be debated. And in autocracies or authoritarian states, only if it suits the interest of the state. And if it does not happen, then it does not happen. And democracies usually, from my point of view, they work rather with each other. And this is a thing for climate change, because climate change is a global problem, international problem. So we need to work together. Autocratic states, no, not so far. They rather try to isolate often themselves and to have their own agenda. And you see it with Hungary. Hungary, for example, is a very isolated island right now in the European Union on many levels. So I think that's what you said also about what is debated currently, taxes, yeah, but not climate change. And this is the problem where I see a structural problem. If we in the EU cannot solve our democratic system or political thing, it does not need, Lilla's right, it does not need to be like, we need to be on the same page. Maybe that was wrong, but we need to be at least somehow find a compromise and a working system where we're not always in a PUT situation.
Thank you. Anybody else? Are there more questions? Because I don't see any questions in the chat. Rafal, you mentioned there are many more questions, so I thought maybe you received some.
No, I haven't received questions now.
Can I add some thoughts until
of course.
we're waiting for more questions? So I think another nature of the politics, which is not a democracy issue, it's more about the nature of the power and how politicians want to get it. Because climate change is a complicated issue with a lot of risks. And politicians just want to win elections without any risk takings or limited risk takings. And I think it's one of the main reasons that the bias nature of this question, because the political elite just play a safe game, and that's how the EU and like civil societies and the public opinion comes in the picture, because if they give a sign that climate change is an important issue for us and we should act now, like the climate strikes was a warning signal, or this questionnaire was also important action, the politicians and the politics will react on it, and also will try to form the public opinion. That at the same time it's also try to interact with the publics, and that's why the participation and activity is so important in these kind of issues like climate change.
Thank you. It's really good that you added that, because then now we have the top-down and bottom-up approach. And any questions? Any burning questions? Erik, please.
Just one rather a comment, but maybe maybe a question at the end, because Rafal mentioned something very interesting, what we could listen to a bit earlier during one of our previous webinars, that for a better democracy, for a better society, for kind of better living conditions, we need more justice, we need more equality, we need more we need more equality, and we have to reduce and decrease the differences, the social distances, and so on. So maybe the roadmap is clear, and we were talking about during the previous webinars as well. So maybe the task or the roadmap is clear, but if in this context, in this special topic related to green future sustainability, what does specifically this more justice mean?
A good example would be Czech Republic made a case in front of the European Court of Justice against Poland. They forced basically a closure of a neighboring coal plant or coal mine. And so the Polish were striking against it. And now you have a real example of social justice. You have now Polish coal miners. What will you do with them? And here is the issue, how would you solve it? And this is what I criticized. The European Union sees the European Green Deal as an economic strategy. So the Just Transition Fund, you give money. So theoretically now the coal miners can be relocated, re-educated, compensation paid, but you need still ask the question, do you want to be relocated? Do you want to live in another city? Maybe the answer is no. Somehow there are things which you cannot fix with just with money. And this is where we need to make the progress. This is a real example of social justice, not something very theoretical, a very up-to-date case from May. And I think if we might find the answer to this, we might continue in the future with good progress.
Yes, and also just to chip in, yeah, exactly what Rafal mentioned, but on an even bigger scale. It's not a mistake that it's called just transition. You need to make sure that what these proposals entail in terms of job security, for example. Obviously, there needs to be a safe spot for these workers for even well before the transition begins. And some other example that for me is also really crucial is education. You have to make sure that the society is ready for whatever comes, because no matter what really high-level politicians decide, no matter how sustainable those solutions might be, but if the society is not ready to take in those kind of transitional mechanisms, then it isn't worth it. I mean, obviously it is, but it's really hard to implement. So I think that number one, or even step zero, should be to make sure that the society is ready and they understand what it's all about. Because if you don't convince them that this is what's happening, it's maybe on a short-term scale, maybe it has some difficulties, but on a long-term scale, it's worth it. Then, I mean, obviously, at the same time, you have to start with high-level decision makers, and also, as we just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, with civil society, with business sector, etc. But you shouldn't forget that there is the society in general for whom you want to do it. But you have to make sure that they understand and they see through, and that you provide enough information for them to see through, because they won't go on EU websites, they won't go and see the statistics. You have to, as a local representative, as a local politician, for example, you have to make sure that they understand what's in it for them. And I think this is the social aspect that sometimes is lacking.
Yes, I just want some thoughts for Lilla's comments, which I totally agree with them. So, for example, coal miners is a typical example of the complications of climate change and social issues. Because, for example, the economic transition in Germany, in the rural country, just at least like almost 6 decades from the late 50s, because these coal miners has well-paid jobs, strong civil unions, and strong society and strong identity as well. And if the politician just came there and said that you will lost your jobs and you lost your identity and so on, it won't working, because you should give an alternative, for example, and it is a long and sophisticated process. For example, in a Polish coal regions, it's, for example, early retirement is a possible solution, because miner society is an aging society, and if you get some benefits and get well-paid pensions, they will accept because it became an interest of him or her or there, because and it's the key. So you should provide an alternative to them to accept to get the exception of these changes.
Thank you, Csaba. And I have a follow-up question, especially Lilla, for you, because you mentioned that the society needs to be ready as well. So how do you see the Hungarian society? Is it ready for educational change, for example?
Tricky question, but thank you, Emma, for this. I believe that the potential is there. And let me just really quickly turn back to the proposal package we just put forward. On the one hand, as I mentioned, obviously, education is a national competence. So at the end of the day, when we just see the V4 region, or if we see especially Hungary, obviously, at the end of the day, it's in the hand of the decision makers to make this shift, to make this change. But what's really important is that if we can have a V4 level incentivized for this, that would be really great, because then we can have the know-how, and also we can have, you know, the experiences from all the other countries to see how it works. And when we had the preparatory session in terms of education, as I mentioned, we had these closed expert consultations. Something that both the civil society as well as representatives from the governmental sector, also business sector, they agreed on, is that there needs to be a shift towards this non-frontal education when it comes to, and skills development when it comes to sustainability. Obviously, this is not something that can go from one day to another, because in the region, and I think this is not just specific to Hungary, but in the region, we have this really kind of, in a sense, old school type of, you know, really frontal ex cathedra type of teaching, which obviously has also some benefits. But I think in 21st century, really need to know that skills development should be in the focus. And also, once it's managed, and I think that now with the globalized world, students, especially university students, which obviously afterwards they can lead this whole societal transformation, they have the need and they have the urge to learn in a different format, to develop skills. This is why one of our proposals concerning education is to incentivize higher education to promote this kind of methods and to offer classes in these formats. And finally, as the third step, it's not enough if really sustainability is included in the national curriculum. It's not enough if you can learn in higher education relating to your own profession, should it be the legal system, should it be med school, how in your profession you can incentivize sustainable solutions. And I'm not talking about sustainable practices in themselves, but rather policy related suggestions. But at the end of the day, also, we really hope that research and development can be boosted in the region, because young, bright minds in the region, they can be the leading force in that kind of social change or social transformation or social, leading role, or kind of making the society ready that we were discussing.
I would touch on that maybe very quickly. Lilla, you often speak about inclusion. I think this is very important, and also the question of Emma, how to look at the education in Hungary, or maybe also in the broader region. I think there needs to be more inclusion in the education per se, so that so it starts in the school and finishes somewhere else, that every voice matters. So your active participation is important. And a good practice from Hungary, you have climate assembly. So also in Poland, local governments. So local governments are different than national governments. They introduced this kind of like innovative format. I think they leaned it from UK, where you gather citizens, also probably participants from the companies, culture. So everyone is invited. and then you can discuss together the challenges within your country. And so they do right now in Glasgow, in Scotland. So now they have a good climate assembly going on to discuss the challenges ahead of COP. And this is kind of very innovative. And this is what you're always preaching, this kind of like multi-stakeholder thing, that you have more people on the table. And this is this inclusiveness. And I think there should be more incentives from national governments to have this kind of inclusive nature, because I think this is the way to go. And what some people would also call it a democratic innovation, this kind of climate assembly. This is like new participative approaches to a political system. Like this comes close to this kind of like good governance.
Thank you. Csaba, you would like to add something?
A comment? Yes, I just yeah, I agree and entirely agree on with your opinion. And at the same time, it is important to use universities like hubs, because it should be open for the wide publicity. And for example, if an elderly people want to go and learn about climate change, and we should allow them to use universities and attend these lectures, because in several Western countries, it's like a common phenomenon that elderly people or just other people who didn't go to universities just attend on these lectures and broader than their mind. And the other factor is that it is important to use different communication channels like public media or like YouTube or other platforms to create content related to climate change. And I think it can affect wider communities and the public side related to this issue.
Thank you. I think it's unfortunately the time is almost up, but it's really good to close the discussion with some positive aspects like climate assemblies. And it seems there is still hope for sustainability transition in the Visegrad region. Actually, now it's really the time that something is moving. And thank you all for this really intriguing discussion. We gained some insight about the complexity of the climate and energy policy related questions and the difficulties of trade-offs between different aspects of sustainability. And obviously there is a lot more to talk about. So I hope to see you in some other occasions. Also hope to see you in a few further events of the Hungarian Europe Society. And as Erik mentioned, the closing conference of our Uncertain Times project will take place in September, and you will all receive the invitation on time. And till then, I wish you all a nice summer and nice weather in Prague, Lilla, and in Budapest for the others. And yeah, hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.